Hello world, I am Sanjay Malik and I love Flow Cytometry. So do I love to talk about Flow Cytometry. Flow Cytometry has completely changed my life. I am been in love with Flow Cytometry for the last 15 years. So I am in this series of lectures. I am talking about different aspects of Flow Cytometry, what Flow Cytometry can do, how it does, how it does things, what are the different experiments, how we can design the experiments. So there will be, I'll be talking about many different aspects. But in today's session, in this I named this session H part 2. Okay. So in this second part of this session, I'll talk about what are the measurements that we do with flow cytometry. Okay. So flow cytometry can tell us about multiple physical parameters of a cell or particle. Okay. But here I'll talk about what are these measurements. What measurements are actually done. Okay. So what measurements? So when we talk about what measurements are done, so what is the signal to which we do the measurement, okay? And then how the signal is coming, okay? How the signature signals are coming. So we do this measurements. So and flow cytometry is a laser based instrument. Okay, so it's basically there is a laser. Okay. Laser or a light source. It's not necessarily it has to be laser. Okay, so there is a light source. Okay, there is incident light, and as the cell comes in the path of the light, okay, as the cell comes in the path of the light, there is interaction of material with the photon, the light. Okay, so we all know light travels in straight line. Okay, but when the particle comes in the path of the light, it deviates from its straight line. Okay, so why does it deviate from its straight line and all? We'll look into this now. So this is basically, so, and then when there is interaction between matter and the photons, there are few things that happens. Okay, so one is scattering of light. Okay, one is what we see, scattering of light. Okay, there are different form of scattering. I'll be talking about those briefly, and then fluorescence. Okay, so I'll be talking about most of the instrument, the most general instrument I'll be talking about the thing that is available on most of the instruments. The specialized instruments I'll not be focusing in this series of talk. So or maybe in future I'll be talking about the more specialized one to the specialized audience. So these are the two things that happens. Okay, so how this happens. Okay, so why does light? So we'll start with scattering. Why does light scatter at all? Okay, so when light is traveling from, so what we know till date from our earlier studies or earlier knowledge is that when light travels from medium of one refractive index, okay, refractive index to another refractive index. This is basically denser to rarer or rarer to denser media. Then what is then whenever there is a difference in the refractive index in the path of light bends. Okay, so there is bending of light. That is one thing we see. So here in flow cytometry, how this happens? Here in flow cytometry, what we have a flow cell. Okay, inside the flow cell there is a seed fluid, a liquid, which we use to focus the cell. There is also a sample fluid in which we have suspended the cell. So when light is passing from air into a denser media, the liquid, and then it is interacting with the cell, okay, and the cell is having further difference in the refractive index. So all this put together, they tend to deviate light from its straight path. Okay. Is it that only the denser to rarer to denser media light is traveling? Then there is another thing. Okay, so that is another thing that also happens in this, that leads to scattering. Okay, so what is happening here? The photons are interacting with molecules. Okay, the cell is composed of several composed of millions of molecules. So the light interacts with the molecules. There are intracellular granules, intracellular organelles, the cell membrane. So it's a complex object that way. So it's a complex object as compared to air or something, the air or water or something. This is a complex object. That means when the complexity is high, the light interacting with the different matter, that further deviates the light. Okay, so this is scattering. Okay, this is scattering happening. So here the light bending of light, the scattering of light. So it is this is that photons interact with the molecules and then change the path. That is scattering. Okay, so let's talk about the scattering. What are the different scattering? So let's talk about scattering. Scattering of light. Okay, on flow cytometry, how this scattering of light happens and what information it tells me about, what measurement it gives me about the cell. So this is my laser. I'll go back again to the laser. Okay, now I'll just be drawing the cell and the laser. Okay. So here is the cell. The light is interacting with the laser. The laser is interacting with the cell, and the scattering happens. Okay, I'll talk about the scattering. So there are basically two types of, rather three types of scatter that happens. That is of importance or significant class. One is called Rayleigh scatter. One is called the Rayleigh scatter. Then the mean scatter and Raman scatter. Yeah, I'll not be going into the details, physics of the different types of scatter. I'll just talking about what concerns us, what is our concern. So Rayleigh scatter is where the light, the size of the particle interacting with the wavelength of the light is smaller. So the particle size is smaller than the wavelength of the light. Okay. So the particle size of the particle is smaller than the wavelength of light. This comes into picture whenever we are trying to study small particles on flow cytometry. Say for example, less than, so with the flow cytometer using a 480 nanometer laser, if we are trying to figure out small particles like 300, like microvesicles or macroparticles, in that case, where that is 200 to 300 nanometer or 400 nanometers, because the blue laser we use is 480 nanometer. So that is where anything less than 480 nanometer, 500 nanometer and less, they will be predominantly scattering the light by the Rayleigh scatter. Then comes mean scatter. With if you talk about the dimension of the cell are in the dimension of mostly, when we consider the bacterial cell. Say for example, 1 micrometer to somewhere around 50 micrometer cells that we are studying. So 1 micron to 50 micron, that is when we are considering this in the wavelength that we use on the flow cytometer, that is maximum. The higher end far red lasers that we use could be in the common instrument, that is 640 nanometer laser. That is okay. So there are the far red laser that is used, but 640 nanometer that you see in majority of the flow cytometer that is using the red laser, and the far red laser, far red 700 plus laser, that is not that frequently used on the flow cytometer. So now, considering this part, that means maximum is 640 nanometer versus 1 micrometer particle or higher. So this is the region, okay, where the Mie scatter is more active. I'll talk about what is Rayleigh scatter and Mie scatter a little bit. Then comes the Raman scatter. Okay, so what is Raman scatter? This Rayleigh scatter and Mie scatter, both of these scatters are elastic in nature. Okay, elastic in nature, elastic in nature. So what does this mean, elastic? That means the incident light and the scattered light, they have the same energy, same wavelength. So there is no change in the wavelength or energy level of the incident and scattered light. However, when it is Raman scattering, that means Raman scattering is a principle. By the Raman scattering, what happens? The molecules interact with the light or photon, and then either they absorb the energy or they lose energy. So in this situation, what happens? The incident light, okay, in Raman scattering, the incident light, the wavelength of the incident light and the wavelength of the scattered light do not remain same. The scattered light could be, maybe it will have higher in wavelength or lower wavelength depending on the energy, whether the molecule is losing energy or extracting energy from the photon. So that is called inelastic scattering. Okay, so inelastic scattering. So so flow cytometric measurements are affected by all these different type of scattering we need to. So while running a flow cytometer, this scattering never comes to our mind. Okay, but yes, if you want to really excel in flow cytometry, we need to know how our particles are behaving to the light source. Having a knowledge of this scattering could be beneficial. I'm not talking about to go into the detailed physics, into the different equations and all, but having a knowledge of how it works, that could be benefit to us. Okay, so we can do better and more powerful flow cytometry by having the knowledge of this thing. It's very simple. There is nothing that we cannot understand. So let's talk about the little bit how it looks like with the different scatter. So I'll start with the Rayleigh scatter and Mie scatter. Rayleigh scatter and Mie scatter. So say for example, the light is coming in this direction and it hits a particle. Okay, light hits a particle. The light hits a particle here. Here also the light in this direction, which is the direction of the light. Okay, direction of the light, and it hits a particle here. Okay. So how the scatter happens in Rayleigh scatter, when the particle interacts with the light scattering happens in all directions. Okay, so in Rayleigh and Mie, it is happening in all directions. However, in Rayleigh scattering, the scattering is much more. Okay, so in all high angle with respect to higher angle with respect to the incident light, the light scattering is much higher. Okay. Whereas in case of Mie scattering, where the particle size is larger than the wavelength of the light, so that is where the forward angle scatter, that is more predominant than the large angle scatters. Okay. However, here the large angle scatters are equally predominant if it is not more predominant than the forward angle scatter. So this is basically the difference that is between the Rayleigh scatter and Mie scatter. So where do we see this? The sky looks blue because of the Rayleigh scatter. Okay, the sky looks blue because of the Rayleigh scatter, and because of the Mie scatter, we see what we see. We see the bright halo around the sun. Okay, because of, so here if you see that if you look towards the sun, okay, if you look towards the sun, then we see the large particles in the air. Okay, large particles in the air, they do a predominant forward scatter. Okay, that is where around the sun we see the sky less blue. We don't see the sky more blue around the sun. But when we look away from the sun, then we see the sky is looking more blue, because that is where the Rayleigh scatter is predominantly observed. Because we say, for example, here is the sun. Okay, so here is the sun. Okay, I'll so for example, okay, I have, okay, so say for example, I put the sun here. Okay, so I'll say for example, the sun is here. Okay, so the person is standing over here. Okay, it's not we are deviating from flow. Okay, but in order to stay in flow, we need to deviate sometime. So when this person is looking at the sun, okay, looking at the sun, there are particles in air. Okay, in the atmosphere there are particles, and the particles that are displaying the me scatter, they would scatter the light in the forward angle. Okay, they scatter the light in the forward angle. Okay, we see that. So with me scatter, the higher scattering is seen in the forward angle. So that's how we see. And since the forward scatter is a property of these large particles, they can scatter all wavelength of light. That's why we see a white region around the sun. Okay, but as we move away from the sun, as this person is looking behind him towards the other behind him, that is where he is finding. So this region he is finding more blue. This region he is finding more white. So there is a transition of blue to white, because here the small particles, they can effectively scatter light in a large angle. So here what he is seeing is seeing the scatter of small angle, and here that the forward angle scatter. But when he is looking behind, okay, so when he is looking behind, here the small particles, they scatter light in a large angle, and smaller wavelengths, they display Rayleigh scattering much more than the larger wavelengths. Say for example, a 400 nanometer light would be exhibiting the Rayleigh scatter somewhere around 8-9 times higher than a red wavelength. Okay, so that's why we see the sky is blue, and here around the sun we see it is white. Me scatter, large particle, it scatters in the forward angle scatter is more intense, whereas the small particles Rayleigh scattering and the large angle scatter more intense as compared to the me scatter. Okay, so yes, how does it work on flow cytometry then? Okay, so what are the measurements we will make because of this scatter? Okay, so again we will draw a cell. Okay, we will draw a cell, then we will shine light on it. Okay, so we have light falling on the cell, and here this is a situation where the cell is, we are separating, we are talking about a mammalian cell or something like that, particle larger than the this is me scatter. I'm talking about we're talking about me scatter regimen, me scatter scenario, that is where the cell size is larger than the wavelength of the incident light. So in such case, what is going to happen? There is me scatter going to happen. So when it is me scattering happening, okay, because of me scatter, there would be higher level of forward angle scattering. Okay, so now that is where in flow cytometry we collect forward angle light and we call it forward scatter. Otherwise, light is scattering in all directions. Okay, so when the light is interacting with the material, the light scatters in all directions. Because it is me scatter, the forward angle light scattering is much more predominant. So we collect forward angle light scatter, and so it is called forward scatter. Okay, so the term comes forward scatter, and in some instrument it is written FSC, some instrument, some people also refer it to as low angle scatter. Okay, so no matter what it is talking about the me scattering, the me scatter of the me scatter generated from the particle. And on flow cytometry, it is one way people all call it about, tell it is, they call it, tells about relative size of the cell. However, this is not universal. It's not that if we are running two different types of particle, then forward scatter noise is not necessarily going to tell about their relative size. Okay. So here, what are the other thing that is differing is the refractive index, because the particle, it has got matter, okay, it has got materials. If it is a cell, then there is nuclei inside, there are granules, okay, there is a cell surface, okay, the cytoplasmic membrane, the cell surface, these all they interact with the matter. So when there is further difference in the refractive indices of the media and the cell, then there is further bending of light. Okay, so the bending of light and this scattering, this led to higher again further scattering. So basically light is scattered into all direction. The forward angle direction, the me scattering is predominant. However, even then we see large angle scatter because of these differences. That means if we have two, now it comes that refractive index. If we have two cells, okay, are large and small, and both of these cells they have same refractive index. Okay, so when they have same refractive index, a similar refractive index, then their forward angle scatter would be, okay. So that forward angle scatter information, we can say that this is small and this is large. However, if we have two different material or two different particles, they may be of same size, okay, but they are what they composed of that is different. That gives an outcome that is that different largely in with respect to the refractive index, or then in such case, although both of the particles are same in size, but the scatter coming of them may not be same. Okay, so in such case, generalizing, having particles or having particles with difference with respect to the material content, what is made of, what is the refractive index of that components, then in such case we cannot compare the size here. Okay, we cannot compare the size here. Comparing the size may lead us to errors. Okay, so we can only do this comparison. Okay, we can only talk about particles. So that puts us in a situation. In literature you will see lot of publications that what they do, they would run standard particles, polystyrene particles, it's all available, polystyrene or latex particles, standard particles of size 1 micron, 2 micron, 4 micron, whatever like this. They run it in Flow Cytometer, they look for the signal intensity for these particles, then they run their cells, okay, and whenever it matches the scatter property of the polystyrene particle, the branded at the cell is of this size. Okay, that is really not the most appropriate way of interpretation. Sadly, it is there a lot in the literature. It would still become it is still difficult to convince people why they shouldn't be. Once they know how it is happening, what is the physics behind it, I think people would be much more happy accepting that and not replicating the similar kind of work. Okay. So this is about scatter. So the forward angle scatter, that tells about the size. What about the large angle scatter? Okay. So here Rayleigh scatter is all about, it's predominantly forward. Sorry, excuse me. So here it is me scatter. Me scatter is predominantly about the forward angle scatter. However, when there is complexity inside the cell, say for example, if I'm talking about lymphocytes and granulocytes, then in such case, the lymphocyte, it has nuclei, granulocyte will have irregular nuclei, they will have granules, the intracellular organelles, and all these. Generally lymphocyte has a lower complexity, the scanty cytoplasm, so they don't have much cytoplasmic material also as compared to granulocytes. So in such case, there is further differences in the, so in such case, the large angle scatter, okay, so the large angle scatter, if it is calcium detector, okay, so the large angle scatter would represent what is the level of complexity or what is the level of differences. So here it could be like light is bouncing from one particle to one intracellular component to other intracellular component. That's how the large angle deviations are happening. So forward scatter tells me about relative size only when there is same materials of same or similar refractive index, and the side scatter would tell me about the complexity of the objects. Okay, so more complex. Okay, and side scatter also depends on the refractive index of the objects. Yes, no matter what particle we take, we get a forward scatter and we also get side scatter. And side scatter is, so what I was talking about, the small particles. Okay, so then comes the Rayleigh scatter. So now we are talking about the me scatter. So here it is about the me scatter. When the side scatter comes, I will talk about a little bit about the Rayleigh scatter, because when we are using small particles, okay, then the Rayleigh scatter comes into picture, and we'll say how the Rayleigh scatter. Okay, so when we have a small particle, okay, so when we have a large particle, the large angle scattering is because of the refractive index, because of the complexity. But what if we have a small particle? Okay, small particles, they predominantly scatter light in large angles. Okay, so specifically when we should study the small particles, it is better to collect the large angle scatter, and the large angle scatter at times is called side scatter, SSC, or it is side scatter, or at some instruments they also call it large angle scatter or orthogonal scatter. Okay, so whatever is this, it's basically talking about the light scattering in large angle. So if you say, if you are trying to study smaller particles, so this is what we are trying to study small particles or particles less than 500 nanometer. Better we can get a better information with the help of side scatter. So yes, we will get some forward scatter signals also, but the side scatter signals is because of the Rayleigh scatter. So we use me scatter, we get affected by the me scatter, we get affected by the Rayleigh scatter, and so and then so these are the two scattering. Then the third scatter is inelastic scatter, and that is Raman scatter. So Raman scatter and fluorescence, I'll put it together. Okay. So this is with respect to the scatter. Let's talk about the second property, is fluorescence. Okay. So we'll talk about fluorescence and Raman scattering. Okay. So we'll talk about fluorescence and Raman scattering. So what is fluorescence? Fluorescence is the property of certain molecules. Okay. So when a molecule is, okay, photon falls on this molecule, the molecule absorbs the energy from the photon, and then it goes to an excited state. Okay, so as it comes back to the ground state, because the molecule cannot stay in the excited state for long, and as the molecules come back to the ground state, okay, so they lose energy. The loss in energy could be in the form of vibration, heat, or non-radiation. These are like, and also they, while coming back to, and they emit light. Okay, so, and also they emit light. So the loss of energy and the emission of energy. So the initial incident light energy is not remaining the same in the emitted light. Okay, so here the wavelength of the light increases. Okay, and the energy decreases. Okay, so it has got lower energy than the incident light and higher wavelength than the incident light. So, and there are different molecules. Okay, so there are different molecules which have got differences in the property. Okay, so it might get excited so with one wavelength. Say for example, it is getting excited with all these things. Getting excited with one wavelength, okay, 488 nanometer. So I will be referring to 488 nanometer a lot. Most of the instruments, they contain 488 nanometer, or they provide 488 nanometer. They just, and so here what we are getting is different. So although the excitation remains same, they will be giving different emission. So that is how from flow cytometry we can measure multiple different fluorescence emissions. Okay, and on the basis of the fluorescence emission we get to know the different properties of the cell, of different parameters of the cell. So I'll talk a little more. So whenever this fluorescent molecule, these fluorescence molecules of fluorochromes, okay, fluorescent molecules of fluorochromes, they have a distinct property. Okay, they have something called excitation spectra, okay, and emission spectra. So if we excite so this is the excitation maxima, this is the emission maxima. Say for example, we are talking about the molecule F5TC. So if you excite it around 490, okay, 490 nanometer, then it is maximally illuminated. However, it also can be excited with anything in this wavelength, okay. But the maximum, that means at this wavelength the molecule can maximally absorb energy. Whereas at these wavelengths it does absorb the energy, but the absorption of energy would not that efficient. And when they emit the energy, this is where, for example, 530, so this is where it emits maximum energy. Okay, so this is where it is predominantly emitting energy. However, it is also emitting energy in all different levels. Okay, so in this range. So this is the excitation spectra and emission spectra. So for one molecule, so different fluorochrome molecules, they might have similar, okay, excitation spectra, and they differ in the emission spectra. Okay, so I'm giving another example where the excitation spectra here and the emission. Okay, so the emission. So here the excitation is, for example, around 560, and it is emitting. Just I'm giving arbitrary examples. Okay, 650. So there would be, that means we can, on a flow cytometer, we can use two-way. We can use multiple emission, fluorescence emission from a single light source, or we can use multiple light source. Okay, so it's a single light source, okay, or we can use multiple light source to excite, so, and then on emission also we can collect single light source, multiple emission, and in multiple light source definitely we can collect multiple emissions from each of the light source. Okay, so multiple emission from each of the light source. So this is how this different emission, that or this different fluorochromes, that would be associated to different information of the cells. So for example, we want to study 5 proteins expressing from the cell. We are using 5 different fluorochromes conjugated to 5 different antibodies that bind to the respective proteins, and they give the information. We are using molecules, tie molecules that bind to certain compartment of the cell and give fluorescence. They bind to that certain molecule like DNA, RNA, and give fluorescence. That binds to even simple like calcium or any calcium or different reactive oxygen species, and all this that gives a fluorescence. So basically, we are collecting multiple different fluorescence from that. Okay, so okay, then the Raman scattering. Okay, what is Raman scattering? Okay, what is Raman scattering is when light interacts with the particles. Okay, so when we talk about cell, it's not a single particle. The cell is composed of several different molecules. Okay, so it's again lot of molecules are there, lot of different types of molecules are there, and they interact with light. And in Raman scattering is inelastic scattering of light. Inelastic scattering, that means the molecule, they interact with the photon. The molecules either they absorb energy from the photon or they lose energy to the photon. In this situation, in this scenario, the emission spectra, emission of light from the emitted light could be of higher wavelength, lower energy, or if the molecules they lose energy to the photon, then in such case it could be lower wavelength and higher energy. So in Raman spectra or Raman scattering, we can get both. So here, since we see higher wavelength, this could contribute to the, like it is called Stokes Raman scattering, and this is anti-Stokes Raman scattering. Okay. In fluorescence, what we call the difference between the excitation and the emission maxima, that's what we call the Stokes. Okay. So now, how these two, the Raman scattering and fluorescence, are going to affect me, or how they are going to give me information about the cell. Okay. So if we have a cell conjugated to certain fluorochromes, okay, or it is either we are using some reagent conjugated to certain fluorochromes, and the reagent that bind to the cell, such as its antibody binding to the cell, and then we have two different types of cell. Okay. One cell is expressing low level of the protein, the other cell is expressing high level of the protein, and when we run it in the flow cytometry, this particle or this cell is going to give me higher fluorescence. Okay, so I am talking about it is giving me higher fluorescence, and these cells are giving me lower fluorescence. So on the basis of fluorescence, we can discriminate that which is containing more of the desired molecules or desired proteins, which is containing less of the desired protein. However, that means we get a fluorochrome. Okay, so it is that on flow cytometry, it's not that we get, even if we have a cell there which is not at all expressing any of these proteins. Okay, it is not at all expressing any of these proteins. That cell also gives certain fluorescence. So if this is the, say for example, I'm talking about FITC here. So if this is the FITC fluorescence we are collecting, this channel we are collecting the FITC fluorescence, then even the cells that do not have a single molecule of FITC will also show up on the plot with the fluorescence. So it should not be taken or generalized that if the cell doesn't contain the fluorochrome molecule, then it should not be giving any signal. No, it will give the signal. So where from the signal comes here is because of the Raman scattering, because of the molecules, the other molecules the cell contains. So I'm not the cell is not binding to the FITC molecule. Okay. However, there are other molecules that is present on the cell that are having similar excitation and emission spectrum. Okay, so then in such case, those molecule gets excited by the light, and they are also emitting too, but their level of emission is low, or their level of excitation, their level of getting excited by the blue light is low. So in either of the case, they get very low fluorescence. However, we will still see some signal. So while we are optimizing the instrument, where we are adjusting the voltage, we need to keep in mind that what we are getting the signal from the unstained cell, or the cells not expressing the protein to which we are using the antibody, will also have something called, that's what we call autofluorescence. And we adjust it in such a way that the autofluorescence, and we have ample room to see for our specific fluorescence. Okay, so for example, I'm doing a biparametric plot here, the autofluorescence. So this is where the autofluorescence. So by adjusting the voltage, we assign autofluorescence level to the cell. Okay. And then, so it's a biparametric plot, 2 parameters displayed here. Okay. So autofluorescence, and whenever there is specific fluorescence, if we have a population that is having intermediate expression of the protein like this one, so it will have moderate fluorescence. Okay, somewhere in between intermediate fluorescence that we are getting. That means, and the fluorescence and Raman scattering, again, it happens in all direction, and for the sake of the instrumentation, it is corrected in 90-degree angle. I will be talking in detail when I talk about the anatomy of the flow cytometer. So here we get scattering and we get fluorescence, and to make it to simplify, or to put it in a simple words, on flow cytometry, if we want to study the measure a parameter, we can, by using the fluorochromes or fluorescence, then in such case we either use molecules conjugated to fluorochromes, or we use fluorochromes that bind to the cell and give certain functional information. and in any of the scenario, we see the difference in the light that is we are measuring. Okay, so be it scatter, be it fluorescence, we see the difference in the measuring. So in scatter, we collect the light. To summarize, in scatter, we collect the light of same wavelength, that is incident wavelength, and in fluorescence, we collect light that is in higher in wavelength, higher in wavelength and lower in energy. Okay. And we can use multiple different fluorochromes simultaneously. So that's how by flow cytometry we can study a huge or a large number of parameters. So the current flow cytometer that can go as high as 30 parameters on fluorescence, but that's not the limit. New flow cytometers are coming up now, and the technology is still developing. And as soon as the reagents are getting also coming to the market, because earlier there were not enough fluorochromes that can be having distinct excitation and emission spectra, so it was not easy or not convenient to use those molecules simultaneously. But now new types of polymer dyes are coming, new dye developments are happening, and because of that now we can use multiple dyes simultaneously and still discriminate them on the basis of their fluorescence property. So yes, flow cytometry is it's going to stay for another say 50 or 100 years, and doing flow cytometry would ensure that we have a stable carrier, or we have at least a safe carrier that way. So I conclude the section, the part 2 of my lecture series, and I will be talking in the part 3 of the lecture series. I'll be talking about how these different measurements are obtained. Okay, so this is how these different measurements are generated, I would say, how these different measurements are obtained, and I will talk about anatomy of flow cytometer. Okay, what in order to measure all these things, what a flow cytometer needs to have. Okay. Sure. Thank you for your attention. Stay tuned.